Hey, family. Have you ever noticed that on days where your mind is cluttered, that your words tend to follow? And if you have taken notice of that, I'm glad that you're here because today we're going to talk through how your mental well being, which is how you think and behave, how it directly affects how you communicate. We'll jump in right after the intro. Hey, family, I'm LinnitaHosten and your podcast host, founder of Vocal Value, where we support emerging leaders to become better communicators. We equip them with the mindset and the skill sets to become better communicators at home, at work, and with themselves. And if you've been connected, you know that we are doing a holistic communication or communicating with a holistic approach series that kicked off in October. The reason why I'm doing this is because I want to generate some awareness around how the state of our mental well being, physical well being, emotional well being, our spiritual well being, and our social well being, how it directly influences how we communicate. When I think about communication skills, I think about how they are applied in some of our most influential roles, whether that be at work, in ministry, with our spouses, children, etc. And these skills likely are, I would say, they have a great effect on how we connect with others. Communication is the root of collaboration. It's also the root of influence and impact. So we should have awareness on um, how other things can impact the state of our ability to communicate. So I want you to do this. I want you to think of when was the last time you were in a funk. I want you to think of when was the last time you were in an emotional funk? Like you didn't feel like it, you were not in the mood. And I want you to think about how did you communicate with your team that day? When you were feeling like, I'm just not feeling it today, how did you communicate with your team? If you had to lead a meeting, how did you lead that meeting? If you had to make a family engagement, how did you show up at the family engagement? I want you to think about that because part of having, I would say, maturity in a leadership role is having an awareness about the state that we're in. When we have that awareness, we can begin to what we call regulate our emotional well-being. So I want you to think about that. And you can share it in the comments. And I didn't even tell my housekeeping. If you're watching for the first time, let me know where you're watching. You can drop that in the comments. And if you're joining us for another week, just stop by and say hello. Let me know that you're watching live. Um, but yeah, when was the last time you were in a funk and how did you communicate? Now I'll tell you mine. The last time I was in a funk was actually on my birthday. I was in a funk because I was tired. And I was acting like a really big baby. And how I communicated, not logically, I will say that. And it was full of emotion. I also had a heightened voice or volume, I would say, a heightened volume when I was communicating. And I was a very short tempered. I would tie that to being fatigued. And which is why I always say your communication style is married to your well being. You can't divorce the two. So I always say, in addition to that, think of your well being like a filter through how you communicate. So, based on the state that you're in, what filters through that, think about the words that you tend to choose when your mood is kind of off, and think about the thoughts that you tend to have. They're typically highly critical. Our perception is a little skewed. Um, and this is as a compounded result of our mental state. Also, when your mental state is maybe not the healthiest, you don't have the most healthiest version or view of self. So you tend to be a little bit more critical, a little bit more harsh, less grace when the state of your mental well-being is not healthy. So there's a direct correlation to your communication style and your mental well-being. Now, I remember when I was going through a state of depression in my mid-20s, and I had a really good friend of mine who actually is responsible for helping me to get into the space of public speaking and professional speaking. And at the time, prior to me getting into the state of not being well, I was responsive. I was eagerly meeting up. I had a lot of creative energy. I had energy, period. I also was very communicative, fluid, responsive. I don't know if I said that. When I got into that state of depression, I had no energy. There were days I did not want to leave the bed. I was unresponsive. I had no creative energy. I had no desire to continue what we were doing, and we both had invested in a program that cost money, so we were hoping to work towards an ROI, a return on investment. This friend was so determined to not let me stay in that place. They called me every day and said, just keep going. I know you feel how you feel, just checking in, do one thing today. And I'm bringing that up because depending on the state that you're in, you may not even have words. You may not even have words to convey to others about how you're feeling. So when you add the layer of being responsible for other people while you're in that state, that's a lot. There's a lack of presence that you have when you're in that state. There's a lack of communication that you tend to have. And the words that you use, they're going to be a lot different when your mental well-being is not in a healthy place. So I wanted to share with you, and I mentioned one of them was an awareness, having an awareness about the state that you're in. And your question should be, how do I develop that awareness? And part of it is tracking the things that really bother you or the things that really excite you. And there's this app that I use on the iPhone. It's under the health app. It's under the health app. I think it's under the health app. And every hour you can ask it to check in with you. At the end of the day, not every hour, but different segments of the day, you can ask it to check in with you. So this is today. I did this for this particular podcast. But in the app, you can identify how you're feeling. And then it'll ask you pleasant, not so pleasant. And then it'll go in a little deeply, like, what is it that's causing you to feel pleasant? Then you can identify those things. And I didn't add this here, but at the bottom, you can put in a note. It'll play again. At the bottom, you can put in a note, or you have time to think, why do you feel that way? Over time, you're tracking, making a connection between the things that are happening daily and the impact that they have on you. This gives you a really good idea of the state of your mental well-being. And if there was something affecting it, this gives you a great opportunity to, identify what that is so that you can begin to make some changes. So one of the things that I notice is when I lack productivity, I don't feel pleasant. When I don't get things done that I assigned to do or set out to do, I do not feel pleasant. When I have a lot of hard conversations throughout the day, I don't feel pleasant. So then it becomes a matter of what can you do to get to a better feeling of or a better, I would say, emotional well-being, which may be limiting tasks to 2 things a day, or writing out the 2 priority things so that when you get them done, you do feel good. On the flip side of that, if your mental well-being is associated with the energy that you consume, it might be guarding that energy. Why am I talking about this? I spend a lot of time talking about communication, verbal communication skills. But the layer of that is the state of your well being affects how those verbal communication skills appear. It affects your tone, it affects your volume, your word choice, the intentionality behind how you're communicating, when you decide to have the hard conversation, how you leave the meeting, how quickly you want to get past or through it. So there's a clear, distinct connection between the two. I'm hoping to generate some awareness about it with this series. So if you're watching, I want you to type in the comments, have you noticed that your mental well-being affects how you communicate? You can say yes or no. You can drop that in the comments. Yes, I've noticed that. Or you can say, no, I haven't noticed that. And perhaps if you didn't notice it, you may not have an awareness. So I challenge you to find ways to track the things that trigger you. There's some other techniques too. If you don't want to use technology, there's something called a body scan. These things are you have to have a very high conscientiousness about yourself. Your self-awareness almost has to be on 100 to have these kinds of things. But notice um a body scan is literally like calming your body, being fully present, like resting everything, putting your body in a state of neutral and thinking through how do you feel? Like taking note of the tension in your shoulders or lack thereof, the tightness of your jaw or lack thereof, the dryness of your mouth and lack thereof. How do twinkle your toes? How does your calf feel? How does your stomach feeling? That's what we call a body scan. And that's another way that you can have an increased awareness. But I think the easiest one is to really when you're having an emotional reaction to something. We talked about this last week. Hey, Jean. Jean said, yes, she has. When you're having an emotional reaction, really sitting in why. When you can identify the why, you will begin to increase awareness about how things impact you. So when you're in a meeting and someone says something and maybe you start heating up, you notice in your body scan that all of a sudden you have a little perspiration under your arms. You didn't have that when you walked in. Or you're getting a little warm. It's getting a little warm in the room. That should trigger you okay, I'm reacting to something. Why? The question is why? That answer is how you identify your triggers. When you have that awareness, when you know you're in an emotional state, it gives you a greater sense of ownership of how you'll speak. I practice this a lot with my loved ones. I know when I am having an emotional reaction. And typically when I do, I don't communicate in the way that I would like. So what I do, and I've been sharing this, I even mentioned it in my TED Talk, I wait until I get into a state of emotional neutral. That is when my heart is not racing. I am not hot. Steam is not coming from my ears. I am not able to avoid word vomiting. I have complete cognition and I can be objective and rational. I wait until I get in that state. I try to at least, and then I communicate. So the byproduct of emotional regulation is you can begin to control when you do have that emotional reaction. You have a little bit more control over your response verbally and a little bit more awareness. If you are a parent, these are power tools that if you can master, you're modeling effective communication. Some of us are unlearning the communication that we experience and struggling at work and in our relationships because our environment was not conducive to healthy communication. So what I'm raising to your awareness with this series is, if that's the case, helping you unlearn and learn healthy ways to communicate so that those that you are connected to, they are not hurting or feeling disconnected because of your style of communication. So I'm trying my best to not go into the weeds as depth with these episodes because I really want you to have a taste and I want you to come and do the work. So if any of this is resonating with you, there are 3 ways that we can work together. If there is an opportunity to improve how you emotionally regulate in regards to how you communicate at work, at home, or with your children, I'd love to coach you. If you run an organization and you have a leadership team, this is a principle that you would like to teach them, I'd love to come in and do a workshop, some type of programming around that. And then finally, if you run an organization and you all have a initiative or like a long-term program where you have a group of talent, and you have an ongoing leadership development program, and you would like to add on this piece, we love to do that too. We just want to toot our horns a little bit, but we just closed the contract with an organization in Michigan. They are a manufacturing company, and they are bringing in Vocal Value to work with 35 of their senior leaders around collaboration and unity, which is rooted in communication skills. So I'm really excited about that, and I look forward to sharing more about the impact that they have in Michigan. What questions do you have? I'll take a moment to see if you have any questions. And if you don't have a question, what was your biggest takeaway from today? While you are responding to that, one of the things that helps my mental well-being, because I have an awareness, productivity drives my mental well-being, then I invest in tools to be productive. And this is what I call, this is my full focus planner. It's developed by Michael Hyatt, and this allows me to track my days, my weeks, and my month. And it encourages my morning and evening routine, and it allows me to time block my day. Because productivity drives my mental well-being, I invest in productivity tools. So a lot of these skills that I'm teaching you, they're compounded. When you start working on one, you'll identify another that is directly correlated to one. And over time, if you are an emerging thought leader, which is whom I hope that you are if you're watching this, these tools are necessary for your thought leadership to be developed. Thought leaders are those who have a depth of understanding of knowledge that they enjoy transferring to others by way of coaching, training, teaching, preaching, talking. And that thought leadership comes from, one, having success or understanding or knowledge in a thing. And the more success that you have in a thing or a space or an area is likely the root of your well-being being healthy, so that you can create those things. I've never been able to be creative in a poor mental state. I haven't been able to write in a poor mental state, communicate my best in a poor mental state. Not my best. I can do it, but not my best. And I wonder if it's the same for you. If you identify with being an emerging thought leader, and you also say, man, when my mental well-being is off, I am not the best version of myself. If the answer to that is yes, what are you going to do about it? So this is not the sexy stuff, this series, but it's the necessary stuff. Remember, what we model, we teach. And we should be modeling healthy communication at work, at home, and with ourselves. I don't see any questions or comments. Don't forget to drop your lessons. What did you take away? What was your biggest takeaway from today? And if you have commented and I didn't respond, I can't see it on this end, but when I sign off, I'll be able to see it. So thank you in advance for your patience. I will see you next Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're continuing the series, but we're talking about emotional well-being. This one, it get real good. I have a lot of programming around emotions and leadership, and I enjoy talking about these things. I love you. There's absolutely nothing you can do about it, and I'll see you next Tuesday. Bye.